Okay, so we'll be a little interactive today. There are going to be a couple of uses of the CA platform. Would love lots of questions, and please submit questions to the chat. We'll also have a couple of opportunities throughout the session for some questions as well. So want to make this as interactive as possible. So as we look at today's agenda, the first three topics are really the primary focus. We're going to explore what we see as the keys to winning with generative AI or Gen AI. Most of the discussion is going to be around key blockers to achieving Gen AI impact, and then a bunch of approaches you can take to accelerate your Gen AI impact. We'll also, at the end, point you to some complementary resources. There's going to be an opportunity to book some time with the team, and we'd love for you to kind of dig in and start building your readiness acceleration plan. So, without further ado, look, I think most organizations and most folks have experienced some of this, like the euphoria and the excitement around generative AI, the promise of, top line growth, smarter decisions, higher productivity, distinct competitive advantage. Like you all have heard the story and you've seen the top line narrative. Unfortunately, the data tells quite a different story today. Unfortunately, over 80% of Gen AI efforts have yet to really make a kind of bottom line impact to the business. So there's a lot, the excitement is clear. The results are a little murky today. And I think the key question for that, is why, right? So, the general question of how ready are most organizations to successfully leverage Gen AI. And that's really the focus of our work with comparative agility. So without kind of further ado, why don't we just find out? So if folks could take out their phone, let's take a quick scan together. And if you could scan the QR code, that should take you to our keys to winning scan. And it's just 5 questions. It shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 minutes to navigate. So give folks a second to make their way to the platform. And I would assume that folks are pretty familiar with the CA platform. But the first question we're going to ask, and this is either for your organization or for an organization that you've worked with recently. So, the first question is, we have a clear and compelling vision to win with Gen AI. And that's not just a vision of how to adopt Gen AI, but it's how do we use it for competitive advantage for our business. So everything from strongly disagree, we really aren't clear on what we're doing, all the way through, Google better watch out. And feel free to leave any comments along the way. They're always helpful. All right, next, our strategy and plan position us to win with Gen AI. And again, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, not sure is a perfectly fine answer as well. But that discussion of, do we have a truly integrated strategy to be successful with Gen AI? And if so, is it really positioning us for differentiated performance? The third question, and it's probably near and dear to most people's hearts, is the product layer question. So we consistently turn high potential ideas into high impact Gen AI solutions. Agree, maybe, strongly agree, not sure. Most organizations that we're working with are struggling a bit in this area. Fourth question, it's a little longer. We have the organizational capabilities to successfully adopt and scale Gen AI across our business. And if you have questions around what some of those capabilities are, click on the question mark. There's a tooltip that'll give you an idea of some of the range of capabilities that are important for scaling Gen AI. And the last question is, we have the data and insights we need to customize our GenAI journey and maximize our impact. So as you're working to adopt and scale GenAI, do you have good telemetry that feeds you good insights, and then can you turn those insights into action quickly and predictably? I'm going to give folks just a couple more seconds to make your way through the survey. We'll close that, package it, and provide the results in just a couple of minutes. But before that, why don't we just have a quick interactive discussion about what GenAI blockers are you seeing? And I should have embedded the link to this so I could go to it too. Let me grab this real quick. All right, so let's move over to the CA platform. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. Okay.
Jason, I see that we have 7 responses. Shall I go ahead and close it?
Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap the survey itself. Hey, Amra, I'm a little surprised. I would have thought that this survey, let me just make sure, but I don't use the survey insights feature as often as I should. So, all right, do me a favor. Um, Scan this barcode that's on here. I may have gotten out of sync.
Maybe the
For
QR is
yeah,
different,
the
so that's
QR, right?
all good.
What type of GenAI blockers do you see in organizations either that you work with today or within your own organization? Is it a strategy blocker? Is it engineering expertise? Could be data. It could be security. It could be responsible AI and ethics. It could be an integrated talent strategy. What issues are you guys seeing that represent a real challenge to scaling Gen AI? So I'll get us started here. And then finally, yeah, lack of knowledge, definitely. And, evaluation. Review fatigue, knowledge degradation is a big one. Um, let's see for others. In terms of, so it's interesting, the review fatigue. If whoever put that in, and no free lunch, boy, that's a really good that's a really good point to add. We're seeing this a lot of in a lot of organizations where everyone's excited about it, and they're having a lot of hackathons, and they might be open to procuring licenses. But there's definitely a lot of challenges getting investment and appetite for a really structured kind of transformational approach to adopting Gen AI. And it's absolutely critical. There's lots and lots of moving parts. There are a lot of technical things that we're going to have to solve. And on the front end, at least, typically it definitely requires some investment from an energy perspective, but typically from a capacity and even some incremental investment, typically really important on the front end. Hey, Brian, are we ready with the survey results, or do you need another minute?
I am. I'm just sending you the link to the report.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Yeah, lack of knowledgeable leadership. Yeah, we're gonna touch on that quite a lot in just a moment, not identifying behavior changes, impact, and how to, I think there may have been some truncation there. Maybe put it in the chat if you had a longer thought there. But yeah, the change around adopting AI and Gen AI is, there's no way around it. There's quite a lot of change because of the different, kind of data considerations, controls, user awareness, even just all the adoption. And I don't know about you guys, but just trying to keep up with all the changes in the industry can be really challenging. So, all right, why don't we go ahead and complete this? Thank you for participating. And I'm going to share, let me pull up the results of our keystoning scan. Thank you, Brian. That's great. All right, let's look at the averages real quick. All right, so it's funny when I see these results. What I'm fairly confident in, and when I look, I could look at the details and be fairly certain, and frankly, even the distance. I think there's a lot of not sures in the scan, and that can happen a lot. And frankly, that's we prefer to have folks. If you're not sure, what good looks like or where the organization is, that's the best response. But we tend to see kind of two typical outcomes across organizations. We'll either get this, significant concentration around threes, which just means, folks are still working to wrap their heads around it. Or for technical organizations, we'll often see very, very low readiness. Vision scores in the in the 1.5. Strategy in the maybe twos. Product sometimes similar 1.5 to 2. The organizational capabilities are quite low, and then insights. To be honest, like I'm not surprised that that's absolutely like that's exactly a 3, because typically when we work in organizations, the answer is heck no. All right, we haven't done the work to kind of introduce the right telemetry across the organization, and there's a mountain of data flying around, and it's really difficult to get a sense of what's working, what's not, and what we need to do about it. So perfect. Like this is what we were hoping to get a sense of with the audience. If we saw a bunch of 4s and 5s, then that would be a different discussion. This is very, very typical of what we're seeing around the world today. So let's go back then and talk about maybe a little bit of a deeper dive around what the blockers are to successfully adopting and scaling Gen AI. And then even better, what a lot of the solutions are, because they're becoming clearer. So look, AI experimentation is great, right? In early stage innovation, you want a lot of energy around strategic change. You want a lot of people looking at this. And there's been lots and lots of success around getting people experimenting with this on the front end. The reality, though, is, boy, most projects, when there have been structured initiatives and there were commitments to the board or to clients or to leadership, a lot of them are stuck in what's being commonly referred to as the POC graveyard. Gen AI solutions are amazingly simple to prototype, and they're very, very difficult to productize. So good news is if you're in the kind of 80 to 90 to 95%, where that's true for you, you're certainly not alone. And the even better news is there are definitely ways and actionable ways to shift the distribution of kind of late stage, almost good enough to high impact Gen AI solutions that really make a difference for your business. All right, the reason so many solutions are struggling these days is just really broad-based readiness gaps. Could be we don't have a strategy, and so only parts of what need to be in place for solutions to be successful are. Could be the right guardrails aren't in place, and so security and compliance are giving that a hard no in terms of even putting that in front of internal team members. Could be data. Let me put it differently. It almost always is data, even if the other two are an issue as well. Data readiness is the number one kind of impediment for organizations successfully scaling AI today. Talent is a big issue. There's the range of reskilling, upskilling, new skills required is really quite significant. And then, few organizations that we work with and that we've interacted with have a really solid integrated plan, and even fewer have a plan that's kind of parallelized and really optimized for pace and for success, and for responsible AI scaling. So the list goes on. Those are the first five that came to mind, but there are quite a few. So let's talk about, if there are a lot of blockers, all right, let's talk about how you accelerate your Gen AI impact. And that's really the whole kind of focus for accelerated innovation as a company. We're focused on, and we've developed what we refer to as the keys to winning with Gen AI operating system. And it's got five kind of core areas of focus. We'll drill into all five of them, but do a particular deep dive into accelerating your readiness, which is the focus of our partnership with Comparative Agility. So let's start out with the North Star discussion. When you have discussions with leaders around generative AI and what they're looking for it to do within their organization, you'll hear a lot of different opinions. All right, people are talking about, hey, anything from it's going to help me write the next board update to, gosh, we should automate our ERP solutions end to end, and this is going to completely change the way we run our business, right? And the truth is probably somewhere in between. But the interesting thing is when you chat with different members of the leadership team, most of the times they have very different visions of what that should look like for the business. And as a result, when you ask them, okay, what is your collective vision? What role do you see AI and generative AI playing in your business model? There's not a lot of clarity and there's not a lot of alignment. So that's what we want to solve for first, right? So we have a series of alignment and planning sprints that we spend some discovery time with each of the team members. We then have a 2 hour, the first week of a sponsor kickoff session, decide who needs to be involved, give them a sense of what good looks like. We'll then have some discovery sessions, try to make them very interactive. We do them one-on-one, so there's a lot of trust. Oftentimes you'll see executives talking about AI and feeling like you can see they're feeling a little uncomfortable. So it's important to get some one-on-one time with them in an environment with some psychological safety where they can ask any questions that are important to them, and you can kind of probe where they are in their journey. We'll complete a survey just like we did a couple of minutes ago. And then we've got white papers or executive briefs on all of these topics that we'll share with each executive. And, that's totally optional. Some leaders really prefer to learn in a very structured way. Others can't be bothered to read let's say a 20-page white paper. Fine either way, but we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and has access to resources to learn the way that they prefer. So the second week is really critical kind of deliverable. We'll spend a 2 hour session with the leadership team. And this is where facilitation is really critical, like understanding what each member provides or sees as really critical for success. And then within about an hour to 90 minutes, gaining alignment, clarity, and focus across the team. And this could be a vision session. It could be a strategy session, which is a little more involved. It could also be an acceleration planning session, which again, takes a little more work. But the goal here is to understand where there's lack of alignment, help them understand what good looks like, and then get everybody aligned around a single action plan for the organization. And again, ideally, we prioritize doing that in a couple of weeks, which is really fast. But we also leverage quite a lot of Gen AI through the process to make it much more effective, much more efficient for our partners and our clients. Next, this is why we're here today. An actionable set of readiness accelerators. And the comparative agility team couldn't be a better partner. I'm sure all of you who are here, have experienced this. We've together built what we believe is the most integrated readiness assessment engine on the market. And it includes scans like we just walked through, a set of integrated assessments that are kind of break down each competency needed to scale Gen AI, and we'll touch on that in a second. There are quite a few of them. Ideally, I don't want that to be overwhelming for folks, but the key story here is start high level, start simple, and then when you're ready to click down to the next level of detail, whether that's vision to strategy, strategy to plan, plan to talent, plan to data, how we're going to enable engineering expertise across the organization. As you're ready to take that next step, we've got the next assessment for you and a clear set of enablers. All right. One of those enablers are a series of acceleration guides that we've created. And let me pull one of those up for you. So when you complete an assessment, each question will have a link to what we call an acceleration guide. So in this case, we're walking through the acceleration guide for testing and validating high potential Gen AI ideas. For the agilists among us, this should be a fairly familiar concept. We also know it's not always easy. And I'll tell you, it's much harder in the Gen AI space than typically because of the early stage nature of the tech. Adoption still a little uncertain. So getting building your muscle around testing and validating ideas early before investing sometimes 6, 9, even 12 months into a solution that just isn't quite ready. You don't have the underlying readiness to productize. That's a huge win. All right. So for each competency in our assessments, there'll be an acceleration guide that helps you understand what it is, why it's important, why it's challenging at scale. And for those of you who've done a fair amount of product work, the idea of, hey, quality, idea quality is inconsistent, and the level of specificity around them can be a little all over the place. Technical feasibility is really the tough one here. How do you test just enough to validate technical feasibility, but also make sure that you're pulling in kind of production complexity so that you're not doing a small scale POC that really doesn't validate feasibility at scale? Then validation takes time. We can do it quickly, and there are lots of tools out there, but you have to make the time. You have to be disciplined about it. Cross-functional input is really important. So we don't want to just have the dev team engaged in early idea validation. Ideally, you'll get some compliance and some risk and some operations, some sales engagement. And then, fear of failure oftentimes is a challenge in a lot of organizations. We've worked with a couple of companies who have never had a pilot fail, right? And that just tells you they're either doing pilots very, very late in their dev cycle, and it's really kind of a confirmation, or they're just rubber stamping early stage work. Talks a little bit about the complexity. How complex is this to solve? This particular topic of testing and validating Gen AI ideas is surprisingly complex. It's the technical feasibility and solution market fit is still really, really challenging to solve for today. Now, the good news is based on your level of readiness, and we use a 5 stage maturity curve from exploring to experimenting to lifting off to accelerating. And finally, for those organizations that see real competitive advantage and differentiation from GenAI, the last stage of maturity is breaking away. But based on your current stage of maturity, the good news is you can come here and get some recommendations of here are the first three things that you should explore. And in this case, where there are workshops or there are external resources, we'll link out to them for you. So the goal here is not just to provide a clear view of where you're not ready. It actually starts a little bit further upstream and asks the question, what does good look like in a Gen AI enabled world? Where are you today? And obviously, because we use comparative agility, there's a great kind of international benchmark that you can compare your readiness against. Then, probably more importantly, what do you need to do about it? And what are the resources that exist to help accelerate your readiness? So let's click down. Let me put you back in slideshow mode. So as I mentioned, we have a couple of different solutions here, and some of them are available. All of the assessments are available today on comparative agility. Several of them are free. The first 7 assessments and the first 7 surveys, you're absolutely welcome to explore. You're welcome to use. You could even test them out in your company because we really want to draw awareness to these different kind of key enablers for scaling Gen AI. And we'd love to get feedback from folks. So feel free to go to the CA site and use any of the free surveys or assessments. Then we just walked through the acceleration guides. As I mentioned, every question on our 48 assessments has an associated acceleration guide. Then last but not least, the question always comes up, where do I start, right? What do I start? What do I do next? Like, how do I manage this complexity? So I think the first, the place that we recommend is where we started today. It's just a very, brief 5-minute survey of let's have a discussion around vision. Let's have a discussion around strategy. Let's have a very candid discussion around products and capabilities. And to be honest, the discussion around metrics and insights is usually a pretty short one. The discussion usually kind of translates to, boy, I would love to have more. How do we get there, right? Then you move to digging into your North Star. All right, so once you've identified, hey, we're not quite where we need to be in our strategy, but we actually have a pretty clear vision. Jump right to strategy. Take the assessment, takes about an hour, and then spend some time with your team and build an actionable improvement plan. That's how you go from basic, kind of transparency around your current level of maturity to let's go do something about it. And then the next question is one click down. Is it product? Are there product issues that you're going to tackle? Do you find that your teams struggle with natural language understanding? Is it some foundational organizational capabilities? We always say that the number one rule in AI adoption is first, do no harm. So if you don't have a solid, secure AI and responsible AI foundation, start there. All right. You shouldn't be doing anything if you can't do it responsibly across your business. If you're already in pretty good shape there, figure out what your lowest level of maturity is and tackle that first. So I've been talking at you the last 10, 15 minutes, which I never like to do more than 7 or 8. So why don't we just have a quick discussion in the chat around what are some of the Gen AI readiness questions if you had an opportunity to explore that you'd like to. Give folks a couple of seconds, organize your thoughts, but here's an opportunity. Brian from my team is on as well. We work with companies all the way from Walmart down to 100-person analytics organizations. So as you think about the road to go from GenAI enthusiasm to GenAI impact, what are some readiness questions that you'd like to explore, or you feel like members of your team or members of your organization have? And Amr, if you could do me a favor, would you mind moderating the chat for me?
Yes, of course.
And, Amr, not to put you on the spot, but we've been working together for a while. Is there what's a GenAI readiness question that, let's say, even comparative agility potentially has kicked around over time?
It's a
Is it
good.
around data? Is it around how do we make things secure or repeatable? What are some things that you've heard folks kind of wrestling with?
Well, I assume security would be the first one.
Yeah. I think that's the number one area that folks, as they first start, they hear about hallucination. They're concerned about what level of access these solutions have to their company's data. They want to make sure that they're complying with all the regulatory and legal obligations in this area. We always joke that if you want to close a sale, just ask a CEO how comfortable they would be going to prison. Right? They're like, oh well, why don't we make sure we solve this first? So security and responsibility are definitely the first two things that we tend to hear a lot about. We'll often also hear what's the difference between secure AI and responsible AI? So maybe we'll take 2 minutes and just kind of help you guys understand that or dig into it a little bit. Secure AI tends to be everything outside of the organization, not exclusively, but mostly, how do we secure our data, our perimeter? How do we control for bad actions like prompt injection and model hijacking? How do we make sure that we've got the right guardrails in place to ensure that external parties don't have inappropriate access or can't manipulate inappropriate access to our corporate information or resources?
We also got one question from Karen, if you're ready, Jason, to take it right
Yeah,
now.
sure. Karen, what was your question?
Yeah, the question is, as so many organizations are in multiple change initiatives, how does one integrate GenAI readiness with other initiatives? How can they reinforce one another, and what are the risks of them pulling down the other?
Yeah, I wish I had a really great answer here. I got to say, from my experience, strategic change is mostly about focus and commitment. And so it's actually one of the places where we start earliest with our clients, which is if you believe that generative AI is important to your organization and it's going to have a major influence on your industry, you actually are going to have to make some hard, proceed, defer decisions. All right, because the reality is organizational change capacity is relatively fixed. That doesn't have to be. I don't want to have I'd love to have a growth mindset around this, but I've run strategic transformation, governance, and a couple of really large organizations that you guys would have heard of. And from my experience, organizations already have too much strategic change in flight. So the harder conversation really is around trade-offs. So if you believe that generative AI is a priority for your organization, if you believe it's has the potential to drive a lot of benefits, but also has the risks of driving disruption in your industry, you're going to have to carve out some dedicated capacity to manage this change, right? And so it's a hard answer. I wish I had a better one for you. What we're working to do is make that change more predictable and easier by providing lots of resources, lots of templates, and a range of capability scaling playbooks. Great question, though. Others, Amra?
That's it for now. But we do encourage you to ask your questions, and maybe we can, come back to them at the end of the session as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back and put a bow on the previous discussion or the previous kind of concept of the difference between secure AI and responsible AI. So talked about secure AI, largely about how we protect external activity from gaining access to either our data or resources. Responsible AI tends to be much more internally focused of how do we make sure that it's clear what's okay for team members to do and not to do. Uh, how do we ensure that everyone is aware of the implications of this? How do we make sure that we're managing privacy? And if you're in healthcare, sensitive personal health information. And how do we control for bias across our solutions? That's a range of some of them. There are more. But if you want a general rubric, this isn't 100% true, but secure AI is mostly about protecting AI from external use. Responsible AI is how do we make sure that we're using AI and Gen AI in an ethical and responsible way across our business. All right, so let's jump into the readiness accelerators was a way to kind of understand where you're ready, where you're not, and what you need to do about it. One of the sets of resources that we then provide are a set of product accelerators. And there's a much broader solution that we're looking to launch in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So, more to come on this, but our core solution tends to be around enabling engineers and product managers how to really create high impact Gen AI solutions more effectively. So here's an example of a product accelerator, and in this case, an engineering accelerator for understanding natural language or NLU, right? So we'll tend to work with a sponsor, spend a couple of weeks understanding what they've done to date, what their team structures are. We'll deliver a detailed, and in this case, a detailed assessment because we really want to understand where the team is strong and where they have some gaps. We'll then configure a custom engineering enablement plan. We'll define the learning journey of what skills are needed and what specific capabilities. For some organizations, they have, parsing isn't an issue, and they do a great job with it, but determining intent is still a little weak, and handling multilingual requests is a challenge. So based on what the assessment results are and what we understand through the discovery process, we'll build out a custom learning journey for the team or for the organization if they're looking to enable multiple teams. We'll then deliver a series of interactive workshops. They're either fully instructor-led or hybrid, where the conceptual content is self-paced and very interactive. And then we'll get together with the team for typically a 2 to 3 hour capstone exercise once a week. And then, probably the best part of our solution is the accelerate phase, where we have some applied delivery sprints, where an experienced NLU engineer will work with your team and help them implement one or two real-world solutions, and in the process, put those concepts that they've learned into practice. We also use a lot of evaluation technology across our solutions or across your Gen AI solutions, so we can understand which team members are really mastering these concepts, which ones are struggling a little bit, and so that we could then provide some targeted coaching where it would be helpful. We then move to integrated capability accelerators. This is a little bit of a sneak preview. This is actually going to be available on our website on Friday. But for each of a number of capabilities across the organization, whether that's secure AI, responsible AI, governance. Could be data readiness. We're doing a ton of work in that space. Structured evaluation that I just touched on. We do a lot of talent and a lot of center of enablement work. We've got typically a 2-quarter enablement journey that starts with, again, baselining your readiness, much like we did elsewhere. Discovery sessions, a readiness scan. We'll provide a white paper for each of the 20 enterprise capabilities that are in scope. We'll hold a leadership alignment and action planning session. Phase 2, we develop your plan. We train folks to do the detailed deep dive sessions. And then the phase 3, we're really looking at what's your target operating model and how do you accelerate that. So we have a series of templated processes that we can customize per client. But the goal is to make it as easy and straightforward to configure and customize your plan. And so that within 2-3 quarters at the most, you've really worked up the curve in that area. And in the process, we want to be delivering weekly quick wins. Could be small, and every week they get a little larger and kind of more impactful. But one of the big challenges in any transformation is it can take a long time, to be honest, to see value. So we've done a bunch of work on the front end to be able to deliver some reasons to believe every week across the journey. We've got a modular, configurable acceleration plan based on the work that we've done with other clients. So every company is going to be unique. Every company has done this with multiple clients up to this point. A lot of the kind of key building blocks of success are pretty standard. So we prefer to come in and configure a plan versus starting from a blank sheet of paper. For folks who've done lots of change management, you recognize the importance of communications and a structured change process. So we have both really carefully built out so that each step of the journey is really clear. What's in it for me is clear for the different stakeholders, why it's important, what they can expect, by when, and what's next, right? And then across the whole process, we provide some structured coaching to make sure that organizations really have what they need to be successful. And then the last area, and stay tuned because we have a solution we're looking to bring to market in the next 2 months. Insights into an integrated dashboard solution, right? And the first phase is making sure that your metrics plan, your measurement plan is really clear across core business measures. So are we making money from AI? Are we seeing operational efficiencies? Is that translating to margin improvement? How are we taking care of our customers throughout the process? And how engaged are our team members as well? So, our core business measures to customer measures to kind of product measures are, how often are our customers using our GenAI functionality? What's their task completion rate if you want to get kind of granular? What's the cost profile for us to provide that functionality? And then we go into OKRs for your strategy, risk indicators for risk, data readiness, talent readiness, evaluation performance, and ultimately, all of the CA data we'll be pulling into this Insights portal. The exciting part is later this year, in third quarter, we'll have a natural language assistant on top of that data, so leaders can come in and ask questions about their AI data and really, kind of interact with it any way that they would like. And the kind of killer app is we're targeting Q4. We're looking to build an AI-enabled recommendations engine. So once you have all of this data in one place, you can identify patterns, early signals of risk, emerging opportunities, and the goal is to provide not automation, but data-driven decision enablement through the recommendations engine. So there's a lot coming in space for us later this year. All right, that wraps up kind of the discussion around, all right, first, what are the keys to winning? Right? You need a clear vision, you need a strategy, you need a plan. You need to close readiness gaps where they exist. You need to be able to translate ideas into high-performing generative solutions predictably and repeatably. That depends on a lot of underlying organizational capabilities. Most organizations aren't really quite ready today. There's a bit of work to do. And then underneath that, you want to make sure that you have really good data and insights to understand what's working, what's not, and obviously what you need to do about it. So last but not least, I'd like to encourage everyone to take advantage of the complementary resources we have through the CA platform. So just as I mentioned, there are 7 free surveys, one for each level of the keys to winning in a general survey. And there's one other one. I'm blanking on what that is right now. I'd also love to recommend, suggest you reach out and get 30 minutes with someone from our team. We can be helpful. We'd love to. And we really see, the readiness discussion, the key to winning in 2026 is for organizations to begin to put all the pieces together and make sure they've got the right building blocks and capabilities in place to be successful with this technology. And last but not least, I'd really recommend you build a very specific readiness acceleration plan that's based on data and where you're ready, where you're not, and what's the most important next thing to solve. So last but not least, I'd love to just give a big shout out to the CA team. They're awesome. They're, amazing partner. Jorgen's fantastic to work with. Amra, thank you so much for all your help. And so we really appreciate the CA partnership and are looking to build even further.